Imagine your most intimate conversations being ripped apart, examined, and twisted by strangers. That's what's happened to me. To the best of my knowledge, every communication I have with my daughter is read and scrutinised by her cult leader. So today, I want to really dive deep into what surveillance looks like in high demand groups and explain in detail why we need coercive control laws that hold these manipulative behaviours accountable for the abusive practices that they are. Invading the privacy of communications with people within and outside the group is part of this cult leader's brutal control policy. No member is allowed to have private correspondence at all. Every message goes through a hierarchy. At the lowest level, emails are read to the whole community within a particular cell and a particular location. The words of all of these private messages that come in from families outside of the cult, every single sentence is dissected, to which words are scrutinised for hidden meaning. I think most people can relate to the idea that when you write to someone, especially someone who's very close to you, like a child, then your words carry with you a shared history, a certain rhythm that each of you know by heart. For me in particular, I identify as having dyslexic tendencies, which means I sometimes miss out words, I misphrase things, I will even leave out a whole concept just because my brain doesn't realise that it's done it. If they know me, they don't hold that against me. And they know if I write something that doesn't make sense, then to just check in and see what I mean. But when my emails are going out to a group of people who don't know me, they are looking at every single message that comes into their group as a potential danger, because the group has a really significant us versus them mentality. So anyone who's not one of them is basically seen as an enemy. I'm quite certain there are times when I've said things very innocently, and those words are probably misconstrued in such a way that I can't even imagine. Some of the misinterpretations of things I've said to my daughter in emails have been really, really hurtful. Some of those misinterpretations led to a civil case of defamation. I was hoping that by addressing the issue quite directly, that I would get some relief, that the acknowledgement that what they were doing and what they were saying about me was false would help clear the air. But the reality is this group doesn't want to clear the air. The whole idea of surveillance and this email scrutinising is all just a means to try to manipulate people, which I hope will become clearer as I continue. It's also very important to mention that the leadership of this particular group openly preaches that people within the group are supposed to hate their family. I don't even know how to start making comments about how ridiculous it is. So because this doctrine of hatred is so embedded within the leadership, it plays out through all of the surveillance, which just absolutely blocks communication completely, and which is why this is considered to be one of the most dangerous groups, not just within Australia, within the world. The manner in which members and even people who aren't even members like myself are under constant surveillance is really quite frightening. One of the reasons why the group maintains such a strong control over the monitoring and surveillance of communication is because they don't want to allow the people within the group any freedom to leave. And the people within the group are constantly being told that anyone outside of their group are bad, evil, Satanists, witches, all of these things. And if they associate with them too much, or if they have a relationship with them, then that's going to lead them to eternity in hell. It's very black and white thinking. So anyway, getting back to a little bit more of my story. First few years, as far as I know, my emails that I sent to my daughter were being read out to the whole community. And there was actually a certain period of time when I don't think my daughter was receiving my emails at all. And I think they were going straight to the cult leader himself. I talk about that in one of my other videos, which I'll link to this one. So I won't go over that precise situation here. Following that, my emails then moved up to another level where I became seen as a troublemaker because I was asking my daughter questions about the group, and this cult leader does not like to be asked questions. And he certainly doesn't like answering questions either. At one point I did try to communicate with him directly, and every time I asked him a question, he would avoid answering my question, and he would respond by sending me a link to one of his videos. And I'd be like, I don't want to watch your videos. I want to actually have a conversation, and I actually want to get to the heart of some of these issues and what's going on and the level of control that you have over my daughter. And in fact, when we went to court, he actually refused to testify. He refused to testify because he refused to tell the truth. Personally, I think he refused to testify because he knew that he would have to answer questions, and avoiding answering questions is something this cult leader does all the time. So as things escalated up this hierarchy of surveillance over emails, my emails, they may or may not have gone to my daughter. I think some of them went to my daughter, and then they'd go on to the cult leader. And then the responses I would get back would have been the creation of an editing process with some of the leadership. So what that looked like was my daughter would write an email. She would send it to one of the leaders who would suggest edits, send it back to my daughter. She would make changes, send it back to the leader for approval. The leadership would make more editing suggestions and then send it back to my daughter. And then she would have to make those adjustments, send it back to them. And then that process would keep on going on until the leadership actually gave her the approval of sending the email through to myself or other members in my family. And so I'm trying to have conversations with my daughter through email, and that's the only form of communication I'm allowed to have. I'm not allowed to talk to her directly on the phone. I am totally restricted to only speaking to her through email. And so when I get these emails from her that have been edited 2 or 3 or even more times by the leadership, I look at them and I go, these aren't messages from my daughter. They may be from her email account, but there's been so many editing. It doesn't look, sound, or feel like her at all. And that's really hard to respond to. So if I try to respond to her, I don't know who I'm talking to, because I know that my email is not just going to her, it is going to the whole community, and then it's going to go up through the leadership, and people are going to pull things apart. They do not have my best interest in heart. They have literally called me the enemy. The fact that they actually turn this around and then say that I'm persecuting them when all they have ever done is persecute me and refuse to allow me to communicate with my daughter. Their surveillance is solely used as a manipulation. So my words are censored, twisted, and responded to in a really devastating way. I'm not talking to my daughter. I'm talking to a group of people who dislike me, a group of people who I don't want to talk to. But I can't talk to my daughter without actually talking to all of them and to hearing their voices come back at me. And it's really hard because there's only one of me. There's only one of me, and I'm trying to talk to one single person. And yet I have this group of people who are eavesdropping and taking my words out of context and then actually responding on behalf of my child. And so, of course, our communication is broken down, and I have lost that relationship. Now, I can't see any way how that could actually be my daughter's choice, when she doesn't even have a choice as to whether or not she can keep the emails that I send to her in private, because it is the group policy that every email is shared and that everyone actually goes through this process. There was actually this one time where the cult leader actually emailed me directly. And when he did so, he commented on one of my emails where I had reminisced with my daughter about a childhood memory. Basically, what he did was he took this precious moment that was between me and my child and he turns it into something vile. To have absolutely no capacity to have any privacy or intimacy with my child and just sharing a simple message without the voices of other people joining in. I did not share that message for the benefit of the cult leader. I do not care what the cult leader thinks, or the fact that he actually responded back with, I needed to write more things like that to appease him, which is what he did. He told me I needed to write more of those happy memories to appease him. So he was literally telling me that instead of writing to my daughter and having an authentic conversation with her, I needed to write to her in such a way that would please him. It never feels like I'm talking to my daughter. The way that that man has abused the privacy of my communication with my daughter is just horrific. But still, it gets even worse. He has taken things that I've said in private emails and he's put them up on the internet. He has twisted what I've said and put it up on the internet. He has taken quotes out of context, put them on the internet, and he has accused me of the most horrendous things. I don't even want to mention the sort of things that he has accused me of because it is so upsetting. So to summarise, there is a hierarchy of surveillance of email monitoring within this group that looks like this. The invasion of my privacy in my communications is a blatant abuse of human rights. Article 12 clearly states that no one should be arbitrary under surveillance, and that people have the right to privacy and communication within their family. You can also note that it says that this privacy is to maintain dignity. I have had this human right totally stripped away from me by this cult leader. In more modern internet language, what he is doing, or what he's at least threatened to do as well, is called doxing. That is the threat of releasing personal documents in a public space. So I continue to live in fear every day that something I've said to my daughter in a private email may be shared with the whole world. He's done this before. He's done this after having been found guilty in a civil court. He's done this after being presented with an intervention order. It is clear this person does not respect the law. They do not respect privacy. I'm sharing my story and spelling out these things in detail because it is something that is just so insidious. There is no such thing as arbitrary email surveillance. Whenever a high demand group does this, it is always done with an alternative motive, and that alternative motive is control and manipulation. In Australia, we have quite tight privacy laws when it comes to emails in work settings. Bosses do have the right to check employees' emails, but employees also need to know that. And that kind of surveillance comes under an understanding that you will only use your email account for work purposes. The Fair Work laws protect people from their private emails. But when it comes to high demand groups and situations like these, then I have absolutely no protection whatsoever. I'm not a member of this group. I can't control what they do. My only way to avoid having my privacy taken away from me is to not communicate with my daughter at all. And I can't tell you how heartbreaking that is. I have to be completely isolated from my daughter because a cult leader has the power to do that. That is not freedom of religion. Arbitrary surveillance should not be ignored. These groups should not be allowed to abuse human rights in such a manner that is not allowed in other places. Surveillance in even just one aspect, like emails, is a really powerful way to manipulate and control people. This is why we need coercive control laws for high demand groups. For people who live in Australia, I'm going to link a petition that can be signed to help the governments realise that high demand groups need to be held accountable